Gabriel Wynne, a billionaire known for saving failing companies, had faced every kind of disaster, except the kind that came with emotion. When his father's best friend begged him to help his spiraling daughter, Elena Maddox, Gabriel couldn't say no. The girl he once knew was now a wild, scandal-ridden heiress on the verge of collapse. Reckless and lost in a world of luxury and pain, instead of confronting her as himself, Gabriel made a radical choice. He would disguise himself as a newly hired security guard at her estate and try to steer her life quietly. From the shadows, he didn't expect how deeply her sadness would affect him or how much her beauty had matured into something tragic and haunting. Gabriel thought he was there to fix her, to control her downward spiral, and show her a better path. But from the first moment he saw her, cigarette in hand, and defiance in her eyes, he knew this wouldn't be simple. If you enjoy stories where love heals the deepest wounds, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel because Elena might just end up saving the man who thought she was the one who needed rescuing. Gabriel stood near the marble staircase of the Maddox estate, blending into the background in his plain uniform, watching Elena descend barefoot, with smeared eyeliner and wine still in her hand. She looked nothing like the polished daughter of a billionaire. She was wild, raw, and heartbreakingly lost. He'd expected a spoiled brat, but what he saw instead was a young woman running from something no one had ever dared to name. She brushed past him without a glance, laughing too loudly, dragging chaos in her wake as if it were a cloak she couldn't take off. The other staff whispered about her behind her back, calling her broken, reckless, and beyond help. But Gabriel didn't believe anyone was beyond help. He had seen too many lives turn around in boardrooms and back alleys to accept that. Still, something about the pain in Elena's eyes made his heart ache in a way business never had. He reminded himself he wasn't here to feel, he was here to fix what she'd become. Elena was seated in the back garden that evening, her long legs curled beneath her, a glass of something amber forgotten beside her, eyes fixed on the stars like they might offer an escape. Gabriel kept his distance, sweeping the perimeter under the guise of duty, though he couldn't take his eyes off her fragile silhouette. She didn't see him, but he watched as she pulled out a tiny notebook, writing something with fierce emotion, then ripping the page and letting it fly away in the breeze. He realized then that her recklessness wasn't just for a was armor, wrapped around pain too deep to name. She looked delicate and tired, and younger than the headlines ever made her seem. For a second, she turned toward where he stood in the shadows, and though her eyes didn't meet his, Gabriel felt like she saw him anyway. That single moment cracked the professional distance he swore he would maintain. He wasn't just watching her anymore, he was beginning to care. The next morning, Elena stormed out of the mansion, barefoot again, yelling at a driver who dared question her plans. Gabriel was stationed near the gate, pretending to check the cameras, though his eyes were locked on her the entire time. Her anger burned bright, but he noticed how quickly it faded into silence once the others were gone like a storm that had nowhere left to pour. She walked along the gravel path alone, clutching her elbows like she was holding herself together. Gabriel followed at a distance, knowing she didn't want comfort, but needed it more than anything. When she sat near the old stone fountain and let herself cry quietly, something inside him twisted. He wasn't supposed to feel this, he was supposed to guide her back to sanity, not get dragged into her pain. But pain shared space with beauty and Elena, and he was starting to understand that saving her might require saving himself too. The line between observer and protector was already beginning to blur. Later that day, Gabriel had his first real interaction with Elena when she caught him checking the locks near her wing. "You're new," she said flatly, looking him up and down with suspicion and a flicker of curiosity. "Yes, ma'am, Gabe," he replied, shortening his name to avoid recognition, hoping his calm voice hid the truth. She narrowed her eyes, as if she could already sense something deeper beneath the surface. "You don't look like the others," she said simply, then turned and walked away before he could respond. Her words lingered, not just because of what she said, but because of the way she said it, like she didn't expect anyone to stay. Gabriel realized that Elena Maddox didn't push people away because she didn't care. She did it because she cared too much, and he was beginning to care too much too. That evening, Gabriel wandered the unused corridors of the estate during his shift and found a locked room with her name etched faintly into the doorframe. A maid told him it had once been Elena's childhood bedroom, sealed after her mother's death, a place she refused to enter. Gabriel stood there for a long time, staring at the dusty door, feeling the weight of everything Elena carried. He wondered how much grief a person could carry before it became part of their identity. Maybe she wasn't running from herself, but from the version of her that existed before the pain. When he saw her walking alone on the lawn again, eyes distant, arms crossed tightly around her ribs, he knew this wasn't a girl gone wild. This was a girl who had been left behind, over and over, and who no longer believed anyone would come looking. And now he was here not as a guard, but as a man who refused to leave her behind too. Gabriel didn't expect her to speak to him again, but she did this time while tossing breadcrumbs to birds by the garden pond. "Do you think they remember who feeds them, or do they just keep flying back out of instinct?" she asked without looking at him. Gabriel hesitated, then answered softly, Some creatures remember more than you'd think. Alina turned toward him with a half-smile that looked almost like gratitude, or maybe disbelief that someone actually answered her. "You're strange," she said. "Most of the staff ignore me unless they're paid to pretend to care." Gabriel wanted to tell her the truth then, but the moment was too fragile, too early. Instead, he stayed quiet, anchoring himself to her presence with steady eyes and calm breath. She tossed one last crumb into the water and walked away, but he could feel the shift. She had noticed him, really noticed him, and it was the beginning of something neither of them expected. That night, Gabriel received a discreet message from his assistant back in the city, warning him that his prolonged absence was raising questions. He dismissed it, unwilling to leave just as Alina was beginning to lower her walls. He reminded himself that this mission had an expiration date: help her stabilize, rebuild trust with her father, and leave. But it was becoming harder to think of this as a mission when his heart was no longer neutral. The way she moved, laughed, even broke it, all felt too personal now. He wasn't just trying to guide her back from the edge anymore. He was standing on it with her. Gabriel knew he was in dangerous territory, emotionally and ethically, but he also knew he couldn't stop now, not when her pain had started to mirror his own. They were both hiding in plain sight, that made their collision inevitable. The next day brought a rare moment of peace. As Gabriel found Alina seated on the stone bench near the lavender fields, staring out over the horizon, "You always watch me," she said without turning. "I'm your guard," he replied, steady but gentle. "No," she said, looking at him now. "You watch me like someone who cares what happens next." He didn't deny it. Instead, he stepped closer, just enough to feel the gravity between them shift. Her vulnerability surfaced in the silence, and for a moment, she looked like the girl who had once believed in something. Gabriel wanted to protect that version of her, not the heiress, not the rebel, but the quiet soul buried underneath. As the sun sank low, painting the sky in aching color, Alina whispered, "You don't feel like a stranger anymore." And those words stayed with him longer than they should have. That night, Gabriel sat alone in the guard's quarters, staring at his reflection in the small mirror. The disguise no longer felt like a costume, it felt like his truth, like the person he had been trying to become without knowing it. He thought of the boardrooms, the suits, the billion-dollar deals, and none of it seemed as real as one quiet conversation with Alina. He had set out to save her from herself, thinking she needed order and direction. But now, he realized he needed her just as much. She made him feel again, forced him to see the cracks in his own armor. The line between them, the one that said he was the fixer and she was the broken, was gone. All that remained were two hearts waiting for the courage to collide, and Gabriel wasn't sure if he could walk away when that moment finally came. There was a gala that night, a fundraiser Elena's family was known for, and despite her usual resistance, she agreed to attend. Gabriel watched from the edge of the grand ballroom, dressed in black, invisible to the guests but fully attuned to her every movement. She looked stunning in a silver gown, yet carried herself like a shadow among the glittering crowd, distant and aching. Then, without warning, she walked to warn him, wine in hand, and whispered, "Dance with me, no one here sees me, but you do." Before he could object, she pulled him onto the terrace where no one could watch. There, beneath the moonlight and far from judgment, they danced slowly, silently, and something broke open between them. She didn't ask who he really was, only held on to him like she needed to be reminded that she was alive. If this story has touched your heart so far, don't forget to like the video and subscribe, because sometimes, the one who goes undercover ends up being the one who's truly seen. The following day, Alina stayed in her room, claiming a headache, but Gabriel knew something else was shifting. She had danced with him not as a guard, but as someone she trusted, and that terrified her. He stood outside her door for hours, not because it was protocol, but because he couldn't walk away. When she finally emerged, barefoot and in a sweatshirt that didn't match, she looked at him with guarded eyes. "What do you want from me, Gabe?" she asked. He could have said protection, peace, purpose, but all he managed was, "Nothing, I just want you to be okay." She didn't reply, only walked past him slowly, as if his presence was the only thing keeping her upright. And in that moment, Gabriel realized the truth. He wasn't just here to help her survive, he wanted to be part of what healed her. Gabriel followed Alina to the East Wing that afternoon, where she disappeared behind a locked door for nearly 2 hours. Curious but cautious, he stayed nearby until she finally opened it, covered in paint and breathing like she had just run a marathon. Inside, he caught a glimpse of something shocking. Canvases, dozens of them, all filled with color, chaos, and pain. "Don't look," she said harshly, blocking the doorway. But it was too late. He had already seen her truth painted in layers of emotion. "Why do you hide this?" he asked. "Because when people know what matters to you, they know how to destroy you," she replied. Gabriel stood still, understanding her in a way that shook him. She was not broken. She was an artist fighting the world in silence. A sleek car arrived that evening, carrying someone Alina hadn't seen in years, her ex-fiancé Miles, the man who shattered her heart and left her faith in people bleeding. Gabriel watched her freeze at the sight of him, pride and panic clashing behind her smile. Miles asked to speak to her privately, but Gabriel couldn't stay away. He lingered in the shadows, ready to step in if needed. From what he overheard, Miles wanted to make amends and start over. Alina laughed bitterly and told him she was no longer someone to be owned. Gabriel wanted to run to her then, to hold her and show her that real love didn't control it freed. But instead, he waited and let her walk away from the past on her own. And in that strength, he saw something else. She was already saving herself. Alina was different after that night, quieter, but more focused. She spent more time painting, less time pretending, and Gabriel noticed the change in her breath, her steps, her gaze. One evening he found her by the fireplace, a blank canvas on her lap, her fingers trembling. "I don't know who I'm becoming," she confessed. "You're becoming someone brave," he said softly, sitting beside her on the floor. She looked at him with watery eyes and whispered, "I've never let anyone stay this long." And he replied, without hesitation, "I'm not going anywhere." They sat there in silence, fire flickering before them, and in that warmth, something permanent took root. Gabriel was starting to lose control of the lie his assistant called. His face showed up in a magazine, and one of the butlers gave him a strange look. He knew his time in disguise was running out, but he still hadn't told Alina who he was. When she surprised him with a sketch she had drawn of him, eyes full of compassion and sadness, he almost broke down. "You don't talk much, but you listen like no one ever has," she said, pressing the drawing into his hands. He couldn't lie to her much longer. She was giving him pieces of her soul, and he was hiding behind a name that wasn't even real. But the fear of losing her held him back like chains. He wasn't afraid of her reaction, he was afraid that her love wouldn't survive the truth. They were in the kitchen late at night when it happened. She had flour on her nose, laughing at something he said, and suddenly, the air shifted. Gabriel reached out and wiped it gently away, and the moment lingered too long. "You're not just a guard, are you?" she asked quietly. He froze, his hand still near her face, eyes wide with panic. But before he could answer, she stepped back, brushing it off with a laugh and a shake of her head. "Forget I said that," she whispered. But neither of them could forget because they both knew something real had formed between them, and no amount of pretending could make it go away. That night, Gabriel stood in front of the mirror in the guard's room, holding his real wallet, the one with his full name and credentials. He could end the lie now. Tell her everything. But fear held him hostage because this wasn't just about truth. It was about losing something that had become everything. She had saved him without even knowing. It reminded him what it meant to feel, to care, to breathe without armor. And now, one confession could destroy it all. He placed the wallet back in the drawer and walked out, the lie burning against his chest like fire. But he knew he was running out of time. The truth came faster than expected. A journalist, hungry for scandal, published a photo of Gabriel at a gala weeks earlier with his real name printed boldly. Alina saw it that morning at breakfast and went still, her hand tightening around her coffee cup until it cracked. "Gabriel Wynn, billionaire, investor. That's you?" she asked in a voice so calm, it shook him. He didn't deny it. He just whispered, "I was trying to help, to protect you, to understand." Her face didn't break, but her silence did. She walked away without a word, and the echo of her footsteps sounded like heartbreak. He had tried to save her, but in doing so, he had betrayed the only place he had ever truly belonged. Alina didn't speak to anyone for 2 days. She disappeared into the gardens, ignoring calls and visitors, her pain radiating through the halls of the estate like thunder. Gabriel waited outside the old fountain every day, hoping she would come. When she finally did, she looked exhausted. "Stronga, I don't hate you," she said quietly. "I just don't know what part of this was real." Gabriel stepped forward slowly, his voice trembling. "Everything, the lies were only around my name. But every word, every moment with Euthos were the truest things I've ever known." She stared at him for a long time, then whispered, "Then prove it." And for the first time since arriving, Gabriel wasn't trying to save her anymore. He was asking her to save him. Gabriel stayed away for a few days, giving Alina space, but his heart ached with every hour of silence. In that time, he wrote a letter, not a formal apology, but a raw, personal confession of everything he felt from the moment he saw her barefoot at the stairs. He never intended to send it, only wrote it to stay sane. But Alina found it tucked into a book he'd left behind in the garden. She read it in silence under the magnolia tree, tears falling as his words painted a truth more honest than any apology. "I came to save you," he had written, "but it was your brokenness that stitched me back together." She clutched the letter to her chest, realizing she had felt it too long before the lie broke. Love doesn't need permission, it just demands truth. And his truth had finally reached her. That evening, Alina returned to the East Wing where she kept her paintings, but instead of locking the door, she left it open. Gabriel, hesitating outside, stepped in slowly, afraid to speak. She didn't look at him at first, only pointed to a new canvas, a portrait of him, unfinished, soft around the eyes. "I didn't paint this for the guard," she said. "I painted it for the man who looked at me like I was worth something." Gabriel's throat tightened, his voice barely a whisper. "Do I still look at you that way?" She turned then, eyes shimmering. "Yes. And I'm scared because it's the only thing that feels real right now." Her honesty melted the final layer between them. And in that moment, Gabriel understood he wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was asking for a second chance to love her, right? The staff at the estate had known something for weeks, that this wasn't just a fling or a mistake. The way Elena's eyes softened around Gabriel, the way he watched her like she was fragile and fire at once, it was obvious. One of the older maids, who had worked in the Maddox estate for decades, pulled Elena aside with a quiet smile. "It's not the name that matters, darling," she said, handing her a tray. "It's the man who brings you breakfast when no one else remembers you eat." Elena laughed for the first time in days. And in that small, quiet moment, she realized everyone could see what she had tried so hard to hide. Her heart had already chosen, now it was just a matter of trusting it. That night, Elena noticed a scar on Gabriel's hand, one she hadn't seen before, and asked where it came from. Gabriel hesitated, then told her about his childhood, about growing up in a house where money solved problems but never offered love. The scar, he said, came from the first time he ever tried to stand up for someone else. Elena listened with wide eyes, her thumb gently tracing the mark as if trying to rewrite the pain. "You've always been trying to save people, haven't you?" she asked softly. "Yes," he admitted, "but I never thought I needed saving too." Elena leaned closer, placing her forehead against his. "Then, let's save each other." And in that moment, they weren't the broken heiress and the billionaire in disguise. They were just two souls, desperately human, desperately in love. Elena's father returned from his travels with no idea that a storm had already passed through the estate. He was furious when he discovered who Gabriel truly was until Elena stepped in, not with anger, but with clarity. "He lied," she said, "but he also stayed when no one else did." Her father listened, torn between protection and pride, watching his daughter stand strong for the first time in years. Gabriel didn't make excuses, he simply asked for a chance to prove himself without deception. After a long silence, her father nodded once, then prove it with actions, not words. Gabriel accepted, not because he had to, but because Elena deserved a man who would fight for her in the daylight too. One morning, Gabriel brought Elena to the rooftop where she used to watch the sunrise alone. There, among wildflowers and soft wind, he knelt not with a ring, but with a promise. "Before I offer you anything else," he said, "I want to offer you the truth. No guards, no lies, no tests, just me." Elena blinked through tears, heart racing. "Then promise you'll never disappear again, not from me, not from yourself." He took her hands, kissed her palms, and whispered, "I promise." And for the first time since the beginning, nothing else existed but the space between their hearts. Elena and Gabriel began working together quietly on something new, a foundation for young artists battling trauma, named Firelight. After the place where their hearts began to open, Elena poured herself into it with passion and purpose, no longer hiding her gift or her pain. Gabriel handled the legal and financial structure, letting her lead the vision. Watching her speak at the first event, fearless and radiant, made him fall in love all over again. She was no longer running, she was building, and he was proud to follow her into this new life they were shaping, not to save her, but to walk beside her. This was the kind of empire worth building. Their relationship went public in a quiet way, no announcement, just a candid photo of them holding hands outside the gallery. There were headlines, of course, filled with questions and judgments, but neither of them cared anymore. Elena was no longer the girl who flinched from the world. Gabriel was no longer the man hiding behind a mission. They had found something unshakable in each other. Love didn't need permission from the press. It just needed truth and time, and the courage to keep choosing each other even when it was hard. Elena returned to her mother's grave for the first time in years, this time with Gabriel beside her. She read aloud a letter she'd written, telling her mother about the pain, the mistakes, the man who lied and stayed. "You'd like him," she whispered. "He doesn't try to fix me, he just holds the broken pieces and reminds me they're still beautiful." Gabriel took her hand in silence, and they stood there as the wind carried her words into the trees. It was the end of one story, and the beginning of something even deeper. They were no longer broken, they were blooming under the same sky where they once danced in secret. Gabriel and Elena stood again, this time with no disguises, no fear. He gave her a ring, yes, but more than that. He gave her peace, and presence, and permanence. "You saved me," he said, "when I thought I was the one sent to save you." Elena smiled, her eyes full of the love she no longer hid. "Then, let's keep saving each other every single day." If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel, because sometimes, the real love story isn't about who needs saving, it's about who stays.